say a few things before starting. In case you have not heard, in addition to Jerry Izzo speaking from the pilot's perspective, we have been honored with Sergeant Peter Squalia, Jr., who will tell his story as part of the 75th Ranger Regiment on the ground that day as well. So Jerry Izzo, this is our one of our speakers for the evening, and he was in the Battle of Mogadishu in 1993 in Somalia, and he was actually one of the pilots for one of the helicopters there. And I apologize, I don't have it.
Good evening, everyone. When I first joined the Army in 1977, the people that taught me how to fly and trained me to be a soldier were Vietnam veterans. They were the men with the most recent combat experience. And it was the experiences of these men and the lessons that they learned in Southeast Asia that gave me the skills to survive over the streets of Mogadishu. And thank you isn't enough. The things that they taught me, the lessons that they taught me, saved my life. I would like to ask if there are any Vietnam veterans that are here today, please stand and be recognized. We had 4 Vietnam veteran pilots with us in Task Force Ranger in Mogadishu in October of 1993. Bob Fladry, Stu Kaufman, Ray Frank, and Randy Jones. They were in their mid-40s at the time, still leading the way, still setting the example and still showing us how it was done. One of them didn't make it home alive. Our mission in Mogadishu, the situation that had existed for about 3 or 4 years before the battle, there had been a horrible, terrible famine that had been going on. People were starving by the tens of thousands. Finally, the UN was called in with humanitarian aid to help feed the population. These food shipments were being raided, the food was being stolen, sold, and the money was arming the militias. The UN came in, disarmed just about all of the militias. There was one, the last group, which I can't remember their name, they actually had a name. And they were the most powerful one, and they were in the based in the central part of Mogadishu. Task Force Ranger was formed at Fort Bragg. We were brought together to neutralize, disarm, and capture the key leadership from this militia. We were made up of elements of the 3rd Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, 1st Battalion, 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, and Air Force Pararescue Jumpers. There were a couple other elements attached to us, but those were the major players. As we were all brought together at Fort Bragg, we started developing tactics and techniques to raid buildings, capture individuals inside. We had to learn how to stop a convoy from a helicopter without killing everyone inside. We found out, we thought you could stop a vehicle with a few well-placed sniper shots. We found out it takes about 150 armor-piercing rounds from a minigun to kill a Toyota Camry without killing everyone inside. We developed and practiced these techniques. We got ready. We were all brought together into an auditorium in Fort Bragg. The commanding officer of Task Force Ranger brought us all together, gave us a pep talk, and said, we are Delta operators, we are pararescue jumpers, we're Night Stalker pilots, we are Rangers. But together, we are now all Task Force Ranger. He then invited us to join him in a tradition of Delta, and he led us in singing God Bless America. And I'm here to tell you, if you haven't heard about 500 American soldiers sing God Bless America, you haven't heard anything. It seemed a little, at the time it seemed a little corny to us, but we were all honored to be part of it. We deployed over to Mogadishu in the end of August. It hadn't rained in Somalia in 3 years, but it was pouring the day we landed. We got off, built up our aircraft. We got ready to conduct operations. We immediately went out and started conducting search and seizure missions. We got off to a little bit of a slow start, and then we started to figure out the lay of the land and the terrain. We were trying to capture the leadership. We were working at the bottom of the chain of command, and we were working our way up. About 30 days after we got there, we had one mission. I was in my room. One of the officers came in and said, hurry up, get over to the command post. There's an intel team that's out in the city. They've been discovered. We got a quick brief at the command post at the top, the Tactical Operations Center. And my co-pilot and I ran out to our aircraft. Mike Durant, Ray Frank ran out to theirs. We cranked up. Normally we would taxi out and line up on the runway. And I called Mike and said, he called and asked me if I was ready to go, and I said, yes, I'm ready, let's go. We took off directly from our parking revetments. We started heading at full speed over to the soccer stadiums, an abandoned soccer stadium. It's called the Connie Stadium. About halfway there, we got a call from the command post that said, what's your ETA? And we said, we'll be there in about 4 minutes. And they said, go as fast as you can, they're being chased through the streets. I was pulling the power up into the transient range in the yellow and up to the red, trying to get there as quick as we could. We were going about 155 knots, which in the airplane world isn't all that fast, but in the helicopter world, we were getting it. We did a quick orbit at the soccer field. We landed. These guys came running out, threw their equipment in. Mike and Ray took off first. I was about 20 or 30 seconds behind them. We got everybody off, came back to the airfield, and shut down. That whole mission, I don't think from takeoff to landing, I don't think it took 20 minutes. And as I was shutting the aircraft down, and the engines were idling, and this was at night, and so I had my night vision goggles flipped up, and the people that we had extracted were walking around the front of the aircraft. All of a sudden, I felt someone reach up and grab my arm, and I thought it was one of my crew chiefs, and it was one of the guys that we had just extracted. These guys don't show fear too much, but this guy was scared. His eyes were about that big. And over my idling engines and the turning rotor blades, I just heard this real deep voice. He looked up at me and he said, "Thanks, man. Thanks a lot." And I reached around, I shook his hand, I gave him a wave, and as the rest of the guys were walking off, and they were going around the front of the aircraft, and they were just doing this to us. And the most incredible feeling in my life washed over me. And I turned and I looked at Captain Williams, who was my co-pilot, and I said, "That's why I joined the Army. That's why I became a Night Stalker pilot, to go into bad guy territory and rescue Americans." My two crew chiefs were in the back, said, "That goes double for us, sir." And the only thing better than that is to get to do it again. A couple more weeks went by. We were capturing more and more individuals. We were working our way up. We had gotten their chief financier. 3 October rolled around, and we got good intel that their second in command was in a location. And it was the area around the Olympic Hotel. We quick briefed. Just before we went out to our aircraft, my commanding officer, Major Herb Rodriguez, stopped us and called us all back and said, "Hold on, everybody, just come back. I got one more thing to say." Well, you know, you've heard the plan, you've got this in your head. You're kind of like, let's go, let's go, let's go. We've talked about the plan, we've talked about the 10 contingencies. Let's go before I forget all this stuff. You're kind of impatient, you're kind of chomping at the bit. So we come back, and he said, "I want everyone to put your hand on the shoulder of the man next to you. We're going to pray." And he led us in a prayer. And I can't remember exactly what he said. And he asked for courage, and he asked for our protection. In my mind, I was praying, "Please, dear God, make them all bad shots, make all their weapons jam too." And when he finished, he said, "I want everybody to look up at me, look me right in the eye." And we looked up at him, and he said, "We all come back. Every damn one of us." And normally when you finish praying, you say amen. But this time we said, "Yes, sir." And then we went out to our aircraft. We loaded up all our Rangers. I had 15 Rangers on board my aircraft. Each air crew flew with the same group of Rangers. Each aircraft flew with the same Delta operators. They flew with the same pararescue jumpers. So you started to get to know these guys, and you felt responsible for them. You felt protective of them. And you had a personal relationship with them. We lined up, taxied out, lined up. We launched with 19 helicopters. It was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. One of the bad things about this, you're not sneaking up on anybody in broad daylight with 19 helicopters. They pretty much, it's hard to describe, but the airfield the rest of the city was kind of uphill from the airfield, so everybody could see us take off. We launched out of the airfield. We went to the west side of the city, turned north, and then we approached the target area from the north on a southerly heading.
Am I up?
You want to step in?
Sure.
Pete's going to follow me.
Hi folks, Peter Squalia. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate it. It's a beautiful day out. It's Friday night, and I'm a little humbled that you actually showed up to see us. But it's for a good cause, obviously. So let me take a step back. I grew up in Wilbraham, graduate of Minnetonka Regional High School in 1985. It's great to see a couple of Minnetonka folks here, Wilbraham folks. And now I presently live up north of the city in Reading, Massachusetts. How did I end up in, real quick, I was up at UMass, and I knew I didn't want to be in a suit and tie in the corporate world, which of course I am in now. And so I went to the military, and I wanted to go fly jets. I wanted to fly Navy jets. And they saw I didn't have 20/20 vision, and they saw that I had about C average in history. And they said, "Hey, you know what? great to see you. Let me have you come over here and talk to the Army crew over here. We'll have you jump at it. So, being the goofy kid that I was, I'm like, all right, let's do that. And I went home, told my parents, hey, guess what? I joined the military. And I remember my father saying, oh, you're going in as an officer, right? No, not going in as an officer, Dad. I didn't want to get put in supply officer or something like that. And I remember him just looking at me a little bit, and he said, all right, well, what are you doing? You're at least going to, I joined the Rangers, or I'm going to trial for the Rangers. Father was still a little annoyed to this day, I think, if he was alive, that I joined the Rangers after him putting me through college. But anyway, so I digress. Fast forward, I'm in the Ranger Battalion, and a lot of training you have to go through. And I would tell you that once we found out that we were going on a real-world mission, if anyone here has ever, I'm sure many people in the military, but you don't think about getting killed, wounded, anything like that. It's, if you've ever been in sports, and you practice and you sweat, and you've gone through all kinds of training, all different schools. Now it's finally time to go play the real-world game. So I would tell you that we knew what we were going into. We knew what Mogadishu was about. We knew what we had intelligence, what folks we were going after. But I would tell you those first couple of missions, and even up to that, we were excited. We were, frankly, I would tell you, I'd like to think I was in the elite unit, and I was. But I would tell you, I felt like I played for Alabama football, and now I get to play with Tom Brady and the Patriots with Task Force 160 and Delta Force. So I was frankly in awe with the folks we were with, and I would tell you that package of people probably up until past 9/11 was probably the most elite group that has ever been formed together to go after and onto a mission. So it was, I was very humbled. I know I was a sergeant at the time, a lot of privates, even sergeants and COs in our group were, you were in special operations, but the next level was potentially going up to Delta. So being with that group of people, and I can't say enough about Jerry and Task Force 160, best helicopter pilots I've ever flown with. The things they can do with a helicopter, the extension of their body is unbelievable. So those guys frankly kept us alive that day on October 3rd. So I won't rehash all that Jerry went through, but where I was originally on what was called the Seesaw bird, the Combat Search and Rescue bird. And essentially that is, we drop off Rangers Delta onto the target building, the target site. We have a ground element that comes in and puts in blocking forces. So for instance, this is the target site. We will have folks all around it so you can't escape, they can't bring in reinforcements. And then we rope down on this building and we go in and take down the building and the people inside it. This Combat Search and Rescue bird does a racetrack pattern a little way away. In case somebody gets hurt, the helicopter goes down, people get hurt, we come in. We have PJs on the bird, pararescue, Air Force, high-speed medics, essentially. And so that's what we've done on missions before. And on missions before, we had captured and killed a few different high-value targets. There had been some shooting, a couple of guys took some rounds close. I had slid down a rope and I had twisted my ankle, hit a rock or something. So on October 3rd, I was down on the ground element, which was, again, Humvees and trucks to go into the site. We had one, again, an air element going in and a ground element trying to time it so we got to that site exactly, at 0 hour, 0 minute. From there, I don't know, has anyone read the book or seen the movie? Some people, yeah, good, most everyone. So from there, we were going in on a capture mission, which was terrific. We had actually captured the precious cargo, as we call them, POC, right? PC. We were leaving, we were doing an exfil. The mission was done, we were at it. I knew, and we all knew going into, it was kind of engine territory. We were going in during the broad daylight, which we usually don't. We use night as our advantage for us with the nods and everything like that. This was a Sunday, and in fact, we used to call them no pants days, meaning we were in shorts. We're on the equator, it's hot, it's August, September. We were in the ocean, thinking I was a beach boy or something over there early in the morning. Everyone got called back because of the intelligence we had on some high-value targets. We launched, we drove out, we captured the people we were looking for. As we were leaving, Jared can get into that. That's when the first helicopter was shot out of the sky. We had already left as a blocking force. We had the bad guys, we call them, the captured guys, on our trucks, on our Humvees. We were already heading out of the city, or back to the airfield. At that point, we started taking fire, and somebody's always asked, how do you relate that? If you're driving down Long Meadow, or even Springfield, downtown, and you're just driving your car, and every corner, somebody's just taking pot shots. They're not really standing there waiting for you so much, but they're coming out of windows, and it's a 360 of fire coming at you. So, as we were driving out, they actually killed some of their own folks in the back. A couple of our Rangers also were killed and injured, and we were still making it the way out, and that's when the first crash happened. You want to take from there?
So as we assaulted into the target, we had a lead element with the Delta operators, 2 Blackhawks, 2 Little Birds. If you don't know what a Little Bird helicopter is, the little Magnum PI helicopter. And they would carry 4 Delta assaulters on the small helicopters, and about 12 to 15 Delta operators on the Blackhawks. Their job was to go into the target. They would either air, land, or repel these individuals in. Their mission was to go in, capture, kill whoever it was we were going after. The group that I was in with 4 Blackhawks, where we had 12 to 15 Rangers in the back, our job was to set up the perimeter around the building to keep reinforcements from coming in. So the Delta operators, their fires were focused inward. The Rangers on the perimeter were focused outward. As the Delta element went in, they threw up a tremendous cloud of dust. It wasn't nearly thick enough in the movie that they showed you. Yeah, I tell people all the time, think World Trade Center tower collapsing in dust. Visibility was only a few hundred feet. Normally it was always very windy over there. That day it was absolutely 0 wind, and that dust just went up and hung in the air. As we were approaching to put our Rangers in very quickly on the heels of the assault, we had to actually hesitate about a quarter mile short and wait for that initial assault to go in. And we were hovering over the streets with our flight of 4. You really don't want to do that for too long over an urban environment. Finally, the assault force cleared out. We moved forward, and we had photocopies of the target area on our little holders. And so I kept referencing this, and I knew that my infiltration point was the corner of the building. There was a outside patio with a white fence around it. So as we're coming up block by block, I used to call it Helen Keller Nav. You're just groping one block at a time, looking for that positive identification of the infill point. And at one point, Captain Williams said, "Is this it? Is this the spot?" "No, sir. There's no fence. There's no fence." And we kept going forward. I could not see the aircraft in front of me and know that I would just space 1 block back from him. So I had to go. We all had to go individually to our points. As we're moving along, the hair in the back of my neck is standing up because I'm thinking, dear God, don't let me mess this up. I don't want to put my Rangers in the wrong spot. When I first met Lieutenant Dinamaso, who was the Ranger platoon leader, I said, do you want me to put you in the right, you want me to put you on the ground as quickly as I can, but maybe not quite in the right spot? Or do you want me to take a few extra seconds and put you in the right spot? And he said, please put me in the right spot. There's a million wrong places. There's only one right spot. I said, okay, I'll do my best. We got a little closer. I saw the fence, the patio, and I was just so relieved. I could hear rounds cracking past the aircraft. We got a little closer. Normally, I was able to get the aircraft down to about 20 or 30 feet to repel the Rangers in. They don't slide down they're not clipped in like mountain climbing ropes. They're sliding down these ropes like firemen down a pole. Normally, I would get down to about 20 or 30 feet, which is maybe up to where the exit sign is, maybe a little higher. That day, when I looked down at my radar altimeter, The lowest I could get was 70 feet. That's a long way to slide with combat equipment on. I got to a hover, I could hear the gunfire going off. I was having to look 90 degrees out my right door, and the only thing I could see was a utility shack on the roof of a building. That was my hover reference. Just as Lieutenant Dedamassa was getting ready to go out, and he always sat on the center console facing aft, facing his men in between Captain Williams and I would always reach around and I'd give him a pat on the back or I'd squeeze his arm and say, and he had a headset on, and I'd say, "Be careful, Tom." And he said after the second mission he got a little superstitious about it, and he said, "I wouldn't go until I got my little pat on the back from you." Just as he started to go out the rope, I heard a double explosion. And what I first thought it was I thought it was the Delta operators blowing a door in the building. One of my crew chiefs in the back said, "Whoa, that was close. They just shot an RPG at us, a rocket-propelled grenade." And they had modified these where they would explode at 100 meters instead of 1,400 meters where they normally would. They were air bursting. They were using them as anti-aircraft weapons. They missed us by about 75 feet, and they exploded right off our tail. We had a quick exchange between my crew chief and I said, "Well, did you see him?" And he said, "No." I said, "Well, keep looking. He's going to reload and take another shot at us." And he was just salivating to turn his door gun loose on somebody, and he said, I'm looking. Finally, everyone got out. We released the ropes. I looked ahead. I could not see the aircraft in front of us. The two lead Blackhawks were orbiting overhead. I didn't want to pull up and collide with them. I didn't want to run into the aircraft in front of us. So I came straight up about 20 or 30 feet. We popped out of the cloud of the dust. I saw the lead aircraft was accelerating away. And I was, I lowered the nose and headed out. My performance planning card, which tells us how much power is available on the aircraft, that day it said we had 112% torque available. As we were coming out, I heard Captain, and you could pull from 100% torque to 120% for 10 seconds. Very quietly, I hear Captain Williams counting 1,001, 1,002, 1,003. I look over, I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, you're in the transient range." I looked down, we were at 118%, which was 6% more than what the book said, so I guess the aircraft was scared too. They wanted to get the heck out of there. And I said, "Why didn't you say something?" He said, "I don't want you to back that power off. I want to get the heck out of there myself." So we headed over to the holding area. We were orbiting north of the city, probably about a mile and a half, 2 miles away. And that's where we stayed. And the plan was we would put everyone in by helicopter, and they would come out in the trucks and the Humvees. There was not room to land Blackhawks to get everyone out. The one group of Rangers got put in about a block short, Sergeant Eversman's group. Yep. At least a block short. And in the dust and the confusion, they got put in a block short. So now, they are kind of isolated. Also, if you remember from the movie, there was one Ranger that fell from the aircraft and missed the rope, and he fell 70 feet. And I can't remember all of his injuries.
That was Todd Mark, and I forgot to mention that.
Go ahead.
Just to back, I love flying in helicopters. It was my favorite thing to do in all the military. It really was. It was like riding a roller coaster, and the doors were open. When you flew with Task Force 160, you flew with regular helicopter pods, closed the doors, took off slow. It was like a bus. You got on with these guys, the doors were open, your feet are hanging out, you're having the best time of your life. And they flew mapping the earth and up and down. To this day, I would give thousands of dollars to go back and fly just with Task Force from that point. That being said, the worst part of flying with Task Force 160 is when you have to fast rope out of the helicopter. I'm sure some folks know what that is, but a fast rope looks like a big fireman's pole. It's not repelling. It's a big, thick rope that they have circled. We have 12 to 15 Rangers or personnel in the back of that helicopter They will come up, stand up, hovers quickly. We want to get, now we're a sitting duck. We got to get people out of there as quick as possible. So when we're in the cockpit or the back of the helicopter, you're not standing up, you're straight down, you have all your gear on, you have your weapon. You are reaching out for a rope, right? In the meantime, like you said, that we had a brownout, as we would call it. The dust was coming up. They could not get, 90 feet is roughly the ceiling. So we had guys reaching out at 90 feet with their stuff. And by the way, everyone's pushing. You don't want to be in there. You want to get on that rope. And by the way, the rope, you have gloves on, but those gloves get pretty hot, especially at 90 feet coming down. You're getting hand burns. Specialist Blackburn, I was his name for a second. Blackburn literally missed the rope, or got half of it. He did break his fall. They think he caught half his rope because he had a huge burn up and down the side of his face. But landed. Was very, very injured. He was unconscious. Not to get the gory detail, he had blood coming out of his ears. He had some serious trauma.
Broke ribs, collarbone.
Right, yeah, just a mess.
Backbone.
So he was our first casualty. I failed to mention that. So, and we were taking fire, but not an intensive amount of fire. You could hear the gunshot. I don't know if it's me or Delta or somebody else firing at us. So, at that point, once we knew we had to get out of there. A, it's the middle of the day, where we were going to get surrounded, and B, we had a casualty already who was pretty significantly hurt. So, from that point,
So, what should have been a 15 to 20 minute mission max, because now Sergeant Eversman has this casualty. It takes 3 or 4 guys to move him. He's critically injured. This 15-minute mission is going 20, 25, 30, 35, 40 minutes as they're trying to move and collapse the perimeter and get to the trucks to get out of there. During this time, the 2 lead Blackhawks are orbiting the objective area, providing fire support with their door guns. And they're flying the same orbit, the same predictable path, again in broad daylight. At one point, the lead pilot, Cliff Walcott, called and said, "We are taking a lot of fire down here." Roger, continue to orbit, maneuver as best as you can. 42 minutes after we put everyone in, Cliff's aircraft was struck in the tail with an anti-tank rocket. In the movie, they showed one well-fed, pumped-up Somali step out with an RPG and fire one rocket and hit his tail. They were firing barrages of these things at us. There were 6 to 8 of them exploding around Cliff and the other aircraft at any one given time. And I equate it to grabbing a handful of gravel, throwing it at a stop sign. You don't know which one's going to hit it, but you don't care. One of them's going to hit it. That's what they were doing. Cliff's aircraft got hit. He called and said his call sign was Super 6-1. 6-1's hit, 6-1's hit. There was a pause. I found out later, he said to the snipers that had stayed on board in the back, he said, "Get your feet in." The aircraft started to rotate to the right. He then called to his co-pilot, to Donovan. He said, "Donovan, pull the PCLs off. Shut the engines down. Pull the power control levers off." The aircraft spun and spun and spun. They hit a building, bounced off a building, and then crashed down into the streets. In our aircraft, what we heard then was Cliff go, And I just thought, oh, he's had a hard landing. I didn't have eyes on him when he went in. And I thought, oh, okay, he just landed hard. He's going to come up on the radio in a second and say, "Hey, I'm down at such and such location. Come over and pick us up." That was the aircraft folding over on top of him, killing him instantly. He was clamped down on the transmitter button. So this now chained us to the objective area. We can't leave. We can't leave. We know we're going to be here for a while. The next thing that happened was the command and control the search and rescue bird that was flown by my commanding officer, Major Rodriguez, who led us in the prayer earlier, and the pilot in command was Dan Gelada. They came in with the pararescue jumpers, additional Rangers. They came to a hover overhead the Cliffs crash site, which was only a few blocks away from the objective area. They started to repel the PJs and Rangers in. They got about half of them out. Again, they were about 70 feet, which is about as high as the ceiling. One Somali stepped out of a building with a rocket launcher, was directly underneath them, basically at point blank range, fired. I think what saved them and what saved us earlier when we were fired at, we were putting out so much wind and dust, it was blowing the guy around. He missed the fuselage, but he hit one of the main rotor blades. The blast, it blew a semicircle chunk out of the main rotor spar. And the blast went up, blew that, damaged the rotor blade, and then also blew down, and it blew out the transmission oil cooler. Now all 7 gallons of transmission oil is pumping overboard. Plus, they have a severe out of balance situation going on. Initially, when we saw the video afterwards, Dan lowers the nose and starts to come out, and his crew chief in the back said, "Whoa, whoa, sir, we still got guys going down the ropes." And he pulls it back down into a hover, gets everyone down onto the ground, releases the ropes, comes out. Dan's call sign was 6'8", Super 6'8". And about every 10 seconds he would call and say, "We're okay, I still have control, we're all right. We're 2 miles from the airport, we're okay. Transmission pressure is dropping, oil temperature is going up. I'm okay, we're all right." And I'm saying this for the benefit of the colonel over here. I'm getting accessory module chip lights, input module chip lights, main transmission chip lights. The transmission was starting to heat itself. Sikorsky says this thing will run for, I think they said 5 minutes without oil. No, they say it'll run for 30 minutes without oil pressure. It ran for 5 minutes and it got him back to the airfield. When Dan touched down, he called, he said, I'm on the ground, we're shutting down, oil pressure's at 0. And I'm definitely going to say this here in Connecticut, God bless those Sikorsky helicopters and those General Electric engines because they've saved our lives. Somebody else said this years ago about Grumman airplanes, but I'll say it about the Sikorskys. That damn aircraft could cook, I would have married it. They taxied clear of the runway. Major Rodriguez ran over to the maintenance officer and said, "Is the spare aircraft available?" After a heated discussion back and forth, he had just done an engine change on it. He said, "Give me the keys, I'll take it." He hadn't done a test flight on it. So they had to transfer the guns and the radios over to that aircraft. The next thing that happened was Mike and Ray, who were leading our group. We were now in the holding area, like I told you. They were leading our group of 4. They were called to replace Cliff's aircraft, the first aircraft that was shot down, and to take their place in the orbit, providing cover over the Olympic Hotel. They proceeded over, they entered into the orbit. They made only about 2 or 3 circuits, and Mike came up on the radio and said, "Whoa, 6-4's hit, 6-4's hit." And there was a quick exchange back and forth. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, we're okay, we're heading for the airfield." We took a hit. Mike said it was like hitting a speed bump at about 40 miles an hour in a car, the way the aircraft jumped. He started to head for the airfield, only got about 10 seconds out. The tail rotor gearbox, and half of the vertical fin separated from the aircraft, and they started to spin like a frisbee and go in. Mike said later they were spinning so fast they were being thrown forward in their seats. because they were on the outer edge of the rotation. Ray actually was having trouble getting his arms up to grab the power control levers to pull them down and shut the engines off. Mike made one more transmission where he said 6.4 is going in hard, spinning. He said all he remembers seeing is bright sky, dark ground, bright sky, dark ground. And then just before they hit, he screamed Ray's name. I think all of us, I know, I just felt like I'd been electrocuted. And Mike was pretty calm, pretty level-headed guy, didn't get excited too much. When he screamed like that, I thought he's either got flight controls that are not responding or he's had mass separation and he's in free fall. They hit the ground. Mike and Ray were both knocked out. They both suffered similar injuries. I think it's the L5 vertebrae, your last vertebrae before your backbone goes into your hips, fractured. Mike broke his right femur. They had lacerations. The crew chiefs were not buckled in the back. They got smashed up pretty bad, bouncing around in the back of the aircraft. My theory is when Mike and Ray hit, and the tail rotor separated, instinctively they were still pressing in on left pedal to keep the aircraft, to try to keep it straight, but it wasn't connected to anything. So this leg was braced, the right leg was kind of loose, so when they hit the ground like this, their right leg was thrown to the right, and they both broke their right legs. Ray had also broke his back. They were on the ground for about 10 or 12 minutes, maybe even a little more than that. We had the aircraft overhead. They kept looking down saying, I can't see anyone moving in the wreck. They were in the worst situation in that they were still in bad guy territory, but they weren't close to friendly troops. They were about 3/4 of a mile away from the objective area, and they weren't close to the airfield.
So that's a good point. So at that point, in between both crash sites, the ground force had partially made it back. We'd also had partially the ground force get lost in the sea. It'd be like driving through grid patterns, and the communications aren't the same they are now, but you have a general overall communication. People were over-talking each other. So we had a command and control helicopter up above helping us navigate through the city to get to different spots. The problem is, by the time it got from them and that down to us, we already missed that right turn. So we'd be 2 streets down, take it right. We went to the wrong street. No. It's just, you were roughly 5 to 10 seconds, I would say, between our command and control helicopter telling us where to go. But to take that back, so the ground element, my piece of the pie, we had made it back to the airfield. We had casualties, we had some dead, and we had just heard that the first crash site had happened. Good news with the first crash site was that the Rangers in the Delta that were still on the target were able to run 2 to 3 blocks, 100 yards roughly, to that site to secure it, try and get the wounded out, stabilize them. However, this mission now turned into a rescue mission. And it was 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock maybe, I would say, still light out. Still very light out. That's when we're trying to figure out, just like anything, it turns into a little bit of chaos. Who's back? Where is everyone? How are we going to get the second team out of there? What do we do? Do we go back in with helicopters? Do we go back in with the ground force? It was decided that, frankly, there weren't too many helicopters left. We had the ground forces. We're going to, at this point, famous pieces, the cooks, the Ranger cooks, who were all Ranger qualified, but they're cooks. They were making a Sunday dinner. They were literally in their whites, stirring big pots, getting ready for dinner. Every man was available was called. And again, they are first and foremost a Ranger in the Ranger Regiment of Special Operations. Their day-to-day job is a cook, but when they're ready, we need them, they're ready to go. So we grabbed those guys, and we had a bunch of folks. We rallied back, we got on a couple of trucks. We're going to head up to we're going to head up to the second crash site for the first one, because that was, again, roughly a mile plus away. We made it right out of the gate, and one of my biggest visions is, I was almost laughing, it was silly. I see guys in hooks and white outfits shooting away because we were already taking fire the first time out. RPG goes across a truck, bounces off, blows up over there, and guys turning and firing all the way out. We could not get to the second crash site because we were taking so much casualties and just injuries, and Humvees were getting blown up. We were then, somehow, some way, there's about 2 or 3 Humvees, they call it the Lost Convoy, that had gotten lost. We met up with them. They had some dead and injured on there also. We blew their Humvees in place with thermite grenades. And then we decided we were then going to, again, try and get to the crash site. And like Jerry had said, you can see the rise of the city. It's almost like this. We could see the smoke in the distance and where that crash site. The problem was we just couldn't get there. They had burning tires in the roads. We were taking fire. We were firing back. And one of the weirdest things I would tell you, and the only way I can relate it is, Long Meadow's the good guys, we'll make Wilbraham the bad guys. But how can you tell the difference between borders and territories unless you live here? So we'd be driving through Long Meadow, and everyone's waving to us. It was so odd. We turned down the street, and next thing you know, there's guys shooting at us and wanting to kill us. And that was a different clan's territory that they hated us. So I still remember coming around a corner and almost destroying a bunch of people on the side of the road, but they were just walking, doing their daily business. It was the most oddest, I can't explain it. Surreal, like apocalypse, that place. It was, you would have sections of the city, and yeah, there's a big, huge firefight, and helicopters getting shut down, and people are getting blown up and killed, but I still got to go to the market to get some fruit or vegetables or whatever, the street over. Very odd. So we were never able to get to the second crash site, and that's where the Medal of Honor and the 2 Delta Force members were able to, were the last resort, frankly. They were snipers on the sniper helicopter, command and control helicopter. They'd asked 2 or 3 times permission to be put into that second crash site. I think twice they were denied by the command. Third time, when they realized that we could not get to that second site, they were given permission to go in. And unfortunately, they did hold them off for a while, but they were killed themselves and posthumously were awarded the Medal of Honor. Out of 6 folks at that crash site, meaning 2 pilots, 2 crew chiefs, and 2 Delta, one survived. Mike Durant, who to this day is doing well and actually gives corporate speeches, so he does well for himself. Go ahead, Jerry.
That aircraft that put them in, that put the 2 Delta snipers in, stayed overhead, was orbiting overhead trying to give them fire support. What was not covered in the movie was that aircraft was then also hitting the fuselage with an anti-tank rocket with an RPG-7. It blew the right landing gear off the right side. It fought out the right engine. The right engine was inoperative. The 1 Delta sniper that stayed on board, his right leg was blown off, just above the knee. Both pilots were knocked out for a couple of seconds. One of the gunners who had been wounded and had been pulled off the gun on the right side was in the back, and as he kind of got his wits up and looked up and saw both pilots slump down and aircraft still kind of flying, waffling around, and he thought, we're going to crash. All of a sudden, he could feel the aircraft come back under control, and they started to head for the docks, for the Newport area. Well, the crew chief in the back, Sergeant Shannon, the intercom was shot out. He couldn't hear anybody. Everybody was stunned and deafened. They were swung out over the harbor to line up on the jetty of the docks. The waters around Mogadishu are some of the most shark-infested waters in the world. Brad is in the back, leading all over the place. And as the aircraft is making its left turn to line up on the docks, all Sergeant Shannon can see is water, 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 and he thinks they're getting ready to go into the water. And he said all he could think of was, for God's sake, Mr. Gafina, don't dig. ditch, just nose it over and kill us. Don't let us, the sharks get us with all this blood around us. And just at the last second, they crossed over onto the docks. They touched down. This was when they found out that the right gear was gone. They were sliding on the right side of the fuselage. These sparks are now being thrown back into Sergeant Shannon's face. Sergeant Shannon was kind of having a bad day. And they got stopped just before they plowed into the Sealand containers. My platoon leader was the co-pilot. He called and said, 6-2 is down at Newport. We have critically wounded on board. I need immediate medevac. So I called and said, okay, I'm heading over to Newport. I'll pick them up. I got about 30 seconds out when my commanding officer called and said, I'm back up in the spare aircraft. I'll handle medevac. Super 6-5, get back in the holding. So I went back into the holding area. They scooped up. They got everybody off the aircraft. I didn't find out until 24 years later. They left one crew chief at the aircraft all night. Sergeant Hall told them, guard the aircraft, we'll recover it in the morning. The Newport area was kind of a neutral area, but still.
Good luck.
Yeah. If I'd have known that he was there, I would have gone over and said, the hell with the aircraft, get in, let's get out of here. Real quick, what happened earlier when the first aircraft got shot down, and they showed this in the movie, a little bird with just the 2 pilots landed at the first crash site. And this was flown by Keith Jones and Carl Meyer. They landed in an area, I can't even describe how small it was. If you take all this middle row of seats, this middle section of seats, cut it in half, they landed their little bird in the intersection of 2 streets in the alley of 2 buildings. We estimated afterwards they had about 6 to 10 feet of clearance on their rotor blades. The little bird has a 25-foot rotor disc. To have done that in peacetime conditions would have been remarkable. That they did it while they were under heavy fire is one of the more remarkable things I've ever seen.
While firing out the door.
While firing out the door. They land, they looked over and they saw one of the snipers had already gotten out of the wreck, was holding the Somalis off. They saw another guy come out, helping a third guy come out. And they're watching them, and all of a sudden they got hit and they both went down. Keith turns and looks at Carl and says, I gotta go help him. So Carl said, okay, well hurry up. He's like, man, we're gonna get tagged here, I just know it. Keith jumps out, starts to make his way around the front of the aircraft over to the 2 snipers. Carl looks up. Carl's taller than Pete, but he's built about the same way. He's a big guy. He sees 3 Somalis running towards them with weapons. He grabs this little H&K submachine gun, leans out the door, and with one hand opens fire on full automatic and empties his magazine at them. They're probably about from here to the back door. Empties his magazine and misses with every single shot. Now his weapon's empty. When he was telling me about it later, he said, you know that look Wile E. Coyote gets just before the boulder falls on his head? He goes, that's how I felt. He calls out to Keith and yells to Keith and points at the Somalis coming at them. Keith looks up, pulls his 9mm pistol out, fires 3 shots, drops all 3 of them with 3 shots from his pistol. They kind of show this in the background in the movie. And you have to really look closely because it's all happening in the background. He gets to the guys, he puts his weapon away, he helps them get to the aircraft. Carl then gets into a cowboy and Indian pop-up shoot, duck pop-up shoot, this kind of thing, with another guy shooting around a corner at him. Finally, after about 3 or 4 exchanges of this, he fired 1 round, counted to 3, fired another round. Sure enough, the guy stuck his head around the corner, and he got him. Keith is now loading the 2 guys onto the aircraft. They see, I think it was Sergeant Bush,
Yep.
Dan Bush,
Dan Bush, Delta number.
was the first guy out that was holding them off, and they're waving to him, come get on the aircraft, get on the aircraft. And he's shaking his head. There's 3 guys still on the wreck. I'll stay here. You guys go. So they load everybody up, they take off, they head back to the airfield, dropped everyone off, and then came back out. Now we're past the point where the second aircraft is down. They run out of ammunition. They've been overrun. All 4 Little Bird gunships had run out of ammunition, had to go back to the airfield to rearm. By the time they came back, they said there's indigenous personnel all over the wreck. This is at the second crash site. We can't tell if they're helping or they're hurting. They weren't helping. This is 4 Blackhawks now, either shot down or out of action. Probably about 9 p.m. I had 7 clocks in that aircraft, and all I can tell you is it was dark, it was light. About 9 o'clock, we got word at the objective area. They said we're starting to run out of ammunition. So they sent the aircraft that was behind me back to the airfield. They loaded them up with water, medical supplies, and ammunition. They vectored them in to the crash site. To the objective area, with the intention of dropping all of this stuff to rearm and resupply everyone. As they were proceeding into the crash site, now it's nighttime, so we're thinking we have the advantage. We have night vision goggles on, they can't see us. As they're getting closer and closer to the objective area, the pilot command, Stan Wood, calls and said, 6-7 is taking fire, we're taking fire. We're taking hits. As he's saying this, I can hear over his mic, I can hear rounds hitting his aircraft. And I'm just sitting there thinking, dear God, we're gonna lose Stan and Gary now. They got over the building, and they were hovering with the cockpit over the building, and the cargo doors were hanging over the side with the intention that they would drop this stuff down right to the front door so that everybody inside wouldn't have to expose themselves as little as possible to enemy fire. Sergeant Hargis, who was the left door gunner, he was behind Stan, looked up, told me later, he said, I saw about 6 or 8 Somalis about 100 feet away, which again is about from here to the wall, firing at us from behind a white picket fence. He swung the minigun up, the electric Gatling gun, opened fire at low rate, which is 2,000 rounds a minute, and swept back and forth. And he said as soon as he got on target, he went to high rate, which is 4,000 rounds a minute. When he was telling me about this later, I said, did they stop shooting at you? He said, yes, sir, they stopped shooting. Then I think there were 2 Rangers in the back that were kicking this stuff out. One guy got, I think, zinged upside the head, one guy got wounded in the hand or the arm. They continued to kick all the ammunition out, and the other gunner also got wounded in the hand. There were 2 Somalis down in a tree underneath the aircraft that was firing up into the belly with automatic weapons. He swung his fire down onto them, never came off the trigger, held it down at 4,000 rounds a minute. He said, well, I saw the first guy fall out, then I saw the second guy fall out, and then the tree fell over. He said, I guess I cut the tree down with the minigun. As they came out and started to come back out into the holding area with us, Stan called and said, hey, I've got wounded on board, I gotta head back to the airfield. They got back on the ground. They were offloading the wounded. One of the Rangers said, hey, I think there's something wrong with your aircraft. There's something dripping on my head. I said, well, it's okay. There are rainwater pools in the ceiling. It's water, it's okay. He said, this is, as we're carrying him away on the stretcher, he's going, this is oil. It's not water. So they get out and they start feeling along the aircraft. Here's a bullet hole, here's a hole, here's another hole, here's a big hole. Transmission pressure started to drop. that aircraft was out of action for the night. So that's 5 out of 8 Blackhawks.
So now we're hunkered down.
Now the battle, I won't say it quieted down, it stabilized. The situation stabilized.
So now the men at the second crash site, we have guys who are dead, we have guys that have bled out and died, we have wounded. Most guys, if not many, were either out of ammunition or down to their last 30 round clip magazine, whatever you would like to call it. I would tell you, just on a side note, I can't confirm, well, it's been confirmed to me, I did not see this, but this is during the middle of a firefight at the first crash site. Somalis would chew something called khat, K-H-A-T-T. It's a narcotic. It was like tobacco, but it'd make them high and make them crazy, and they would think it'd make them stronger until they got shot and died. But they came...
Didn't make them bulletproof.
Didn't make them bulletproof. They did come out, again, giving you a little levity here. Everyone's firing, going back and forth. All of a sudden, a cow comes walking out into the field of view. And on a cow is a Somali with an AK-47 firing at our positions. And behind the cow was 2 other guys firing at us. So again, I wasn't there, as I was told. There was literally a lull of about 3 to 5 seconds. Excuse my language, but holy shit, are you kidding me? This is the greatest target ever. Rangers and everyone was raising their rifles just to destroy these guys. And that's when a Blackhawk came by. I don't know who the crew chief was on his minigun, and maybe he was on a high sick leave. But he made steaks and blood and guts of the cow and breed. And from what I was told, people, what the hell just happened? They thought he exploded. They didn't know who it was. But it was confirmed that the cow died and the three Somalis. And supposedly, a ranger looked up, couldn't believe what he saw, and he said whoever the crew chief was, had the goggles down and just gave the thumbs up with a big dumb smile and kept doing the road track. So the miniguns, I would tell you, the guys that were at the crash site would not have survived without Task Force 160, without the helicopter pilots, without doing gun runs. You would, there was guys that were literally getting hit by hot brass off the helmets as little birds were coming in. We were painting targets. We were on the radio telling them where we were taking fire from. If that did not happen, if we did not have air support that day, we would have been captured and killed everyone. There was roughly 100 of us. Now it wasn't even 100 at that crash site. Probably 50 plus at that crash site versus, from what I've heard, 600 to 800 at that peak, around that crash site. So that was now we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. Now it's nighttime, now it's midnight. Right, exactly. And by the way, that's a good point. The reason we were there was there's an ethos, there's a line in our creed that says, leave no man behind. Cliff Walcott was stuck in that helicopter. His body was stuck in that helicopter. Didn't want to leave him behind. We were trying everything to get him out. They were trying to rip doors off. We had the big, huge, I don't know what they call it, not a sawzall, but a similar to a sawzall, cutting away wreckage. We could not get him out, and we did not want to leave him. That being said, as we were doing that, we were getting surrounded at that point, and taking casualties and taking injuries. At some point, we did get him out, got his body out. At that point, now how the heck do we get out of here? It's 2 a.m. in the morning. We had decided, we had a quick reaction force from the 10th Mountain that was trying to help us out, and crazy or not, we had some Pakistanis, UN Pakistanis in country with a 19 Vietnam era tank, 72 M48 tank. So this elite group, the greatest army in the world, were relying on some Pakistani dude in a tank to lead us out to the troops. And it was, and they did have some APCs. We did get in these old APCs that we thought were going to be our coffins.
We're painted white.
Yes, we're painted white, good point, with the UN on the side, which even made it a bigger target. So halfway out, we took a lot of volume of fire. Some folks, we did not have any killed, we did have some injuries. I was in a Humvee. My personal, I still, to this day, I saw a guy come around the corner with an RPG pointed right at our Humvee. He fired, we couldn't get to him quick enough. The round came out, luckily it did not arm. It bounced off our roof and literally blew up in the building next to us. My driver, Sergeant David Easterbrooks, took his pinky, little shrapnel took his pinky off, but we got lucky, obviously, in that respect. We did make it out to the crash site. At that point, we were, the sun was coming up. You may have heard it today. We still have, within the Special Operations community, October 3rd, all around the world, there's the Mogadishu Mile Run, which is actually 3K to 5K. But what that meant was, on that morning, about 5 a.m., the sun's coming up. We want to get out of there. We thought this was going to start again. We didn't have enough room. The vehicles were able to get the dead and wounded in the vehicles. Some Rangers, some Delta in the vehicles. Nobody could fit on these anymore. So from that point, thank God, I was not one of them. I was in a vehicle. But we had about 40 or so personnel who had to run out of the city, literally, about a mile distance, and take fire. We had Romali take a shot to the butt. He was still, for unknown reason, be able to run that way, and they made it to what's called the stadium. The stadium where we got picked up.
The Pakistan.
Pakistan Stadium.
Pakistan Stadium.
Yes, right, correct. So I know we're pressed for time too. You keep going, right.
So they got to the stadium, and now it's about 7:30 in the morning. We had cycled back to the airfield with the last two Blackhawks. The command and control bird is still orbiting overhead. Major Rodriguez is back out with the spare bird, the combat search and rescue bird. So we're back at the airfield around 7:30 in the morning. They ordered us now to start cycling to the Packard Stadium to bring as many guys back as we could in the aircraft. Some came back in trucks and Humvees and vehicles, and we flew our groups out. I think I made 3 round trips. I think the other aircraft made 4. Every time we picked up a group, and I kept asking my crew, is Lieutenant Didamoso in the back? Is Dito in the back? No, sir, he's not in this group, he's not in this group, he's not in this group. And I just started, my heart started sinking lower and lower, and I was thinking he probably was killed. We come back to the airfield, we shut down at 9 o'clock in the morning. We've been flying for 18 hours. 12 of it was under night vision goggles. When I shut the aircraft down, and I looked over at Captain Williams, and he looked over at me, and very quietly he said, "My God, we're alive." And we were both shaking our heads. And I got out of the aircraft. I looked over at my crew chiefs. They were spent, they were exhausted, they were dehydrated. I told them I was proud of them and what a good job they did. I could tell they kind of wanted to be left alone. Captain Williams was not my platoon leader, he was the second flight platoon leader. And at one point I just remember, he kind of said to himself, he said, "My God, I've lost half my platoon." Most of the aircraft shot down were his. I started to walk back into the hangar, and I ran into Sergeant Powers, who was the second flight platoon leader, the second flight platoon sergeant. And I said, "What word do you have on casualties?" He said, "Well, you know, Mr. Durant's crew is missing." I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "You know, Mr. Walcott's dead." I said, "Yeah, I know." I said, "How is Donovan, his co-pilot?" Because all through this whole experience, they kept saying, "We can't get the pilot out, we can't get Cliff out." But they were referencing other crew members. He looked up at me with a real sad look on his face. He said, "I'm sorry, sir, Mr. Bradley's dead too. He broke his neck in a crash." And I just wasn't ready to hear that. That wasn't what I was expecting to hear. So that hit me like a ton of bricks. I walked in the rest of the way. Cliff and Donovan and I, the 3 of us, shared a room. talked about this the other day. You see this in movies when guys go back and see the empty bunk or the empty table, and you really can't appreciate how bad that's going to hit you until it hits you for real, and you realize your friends really aren't coming back. I tried to get some sleep, but I couldn't. I was as tired as I'd ever been in my life. I got up, I went into the hangar, and I was going to try one more time to find Lieutenant De Damaso. And obviously the Rangers were in there. I could tell they really didn't want to talk to a pilot. I asked a bunch of people, have you seen Lieutenant De Damaso? No, sir, I haven't seen him. Finally, one guy said, yes, sir, he's right over there. And I looked over, and Tom was standing there. Tom's actually from Massachusetts. I was 33 at the time. Tom was 26. And he was just standing there with his hands on his hips, just letting his men see that he was still in charge, still alive, still being a leader. I went up to him and I asked him if he was all right. I could see he had scabs all over his face from shrapnel, correct? He said, yeah, I'm okay. And I kind of hesitated to ask him this last part. I said, how are your men? He just turned, he looked at me, gave me a real hard look, and he said, I brought them all back. And I could tell that that's what the only thing that was really important to him, was he brought all his men out. Some of them were wounded and were shot up, but he said he brought them all back. And this next part that I tell you is not to brag, and I'm pretty sure Pete and all of you will agree. Decorations and medals and citations really aren't that important. Tom looked at me and he said, I have to tell you something. I couldn't have asked for a better pilot. You put me in the right spot every time, and after the second mission, I stopped worrying about it. I said, Tom, I dropped you off in a hornet's nest, and I couldn't get you out of there. I don't really feel like you should be thanking me for anything. He said, you have no idea how important that was to all of us, knowing you guys were overhead, just like Pete was saying. The little bird gunships were firing rockets within 30 meters of friendly troops. They were bringing minigun fire within 10 meters. Not one single friendly fire incident. The gun sight on the Little Bird is a grease pencil X on the windshield. There's no sexy high-tech toys. It's gutsy pilots, it's realistic training, it's simple systems, and you practice, practice, practice. I call those words from Tom the medals that you wear on the inside. Because if it had been the other way around, if I put Tom in the wrong spot, if I panicked and gotten some of his men killed or massacred, and they said, well, here's a distinguished flying cross to make you feel better. It wouldn't. It'd make me feel worse. And as the years have gone by, and you rethink about it, you think about it over and over and over again, what did I do right? What did I do wrong? I go back to those words from Tom. And I think having the admiration and the respect of your peers is what helps you get through stuff like that and helps you so you can do it again the next day. The last thing that I want to say, there's different ways that I can end my part. I know Pete has the last closing comments also. I know that many of you have probably seen or you've read Band of Brothers, the book Band of Brothers in the miniseries. And there's the part at the end of the movie and the book when Major Dick Winters tells a story of how the grandson of one of his sergeants asked him if he was a hero during the war. And the sergeant said, no, but I served in the company of heroes. And I feel the same way. I'm not a hero. Not by a country mile and not by a New York minute. I was a scared pilot, and I was trying to do the best that I could to save my friends. But on a Sunday afternoon in October of 1993, I had the back of my helicopter stuffed full of heroes. And it was the highest honor and the greatest thing I've ever done in my life, and I thank God for the opportunity. And I hope I never have to do it again.
How do I follow that up? So we're between me and beers, so I'll be bold, be brief, and be gone. And how do I follow that up? But I would tell you, I echo those same sentiments. I tell you, I keep in touch with a couple of friends from high school. I keep in touch with a couple of friends from college. By far, the biggest amount of friends and people I keep in touch with who are kids, not kids, they're men now who so opposite what I was, who live in completely different parts of the world, who have completely different jobs than I do. I literally consider them, you know, I would go down and help anyone we have. Like brothers, we're having our 25th anniversary down at Bragg this October. We had one down on the 20th at, what's his name? Ross Perot flew in his own private jet for all of us. So my point being is that it is a band of brothers, as I say. It's great. As soon as I saw Jerry was coming to Massachusetts, I jumped at the chance to see him. I really, that part of my life was one of the best parts of my life. Also one of the most tragic, obviously, but I wouldn't trade them for it. So that being said, I don't know if there's any Q&A. We can do it over beers, we can do it here. But, thank you very much. Thank you. Does anyone have questions, Q&A?
Jerry and Pete are more than happy to answer questions.
Just one question.
Yeah, but you gotta, we're recording
I think
this.
they're recording it.
You were flying for how many hours in the?
We took off at 1500 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday, and by the time we shut down, it was 9 o'clock Monday morning.
How many times did you have to refuel?
I lost count, and part of the reason, the objective area was here, so when we were airborne orbiting, when we were airborne orbiting, we were about a mile and a half away. So I made the recommendation, listen, why don't we just go back to the air? We're not in any danger where we were, but we weren't contributing to the battle. It seemed to me we were going to do another ammunition resupply mission, so better to be back at the airfield to be in position to do this. So they cycled us back to the airfield. We would burn down to 1,000 pounds of fuel. Then we would cycle off one at a time. We would hot refuel. I lost count of how many times we refueled. I would say in the black, I think my aircraft and then Jeff and Sam, we probably refueled at least 4 or 5 times that night. The Little Bird gunships, this was the only engagement where they ran out of ammunition and had to rearm before they had to refuel. And they would do their fire missions and they would come back in, top off with the rockets and the miniguns and go back out. Truthfully, I lost count of how, but at least 4 or 5 times.
So, quick question, I was just curious, so I've met Colonel McKnight in New York a couple years ago, actually got his book. So I was curious, 2-part question. One, because a lot of the events that happen, anytime they make movies on things, so I'm just curious, one part is, do you feel that the movie did the justice that it needed to actually explain the story? And the second part of that is colleagues of mine who have been deployed to Bosnia as myself, have met Captain Steele, and is he really the jerk that he was in the movie?
So,
that's yours.
yeah. So the first question around the movie. The movie is, as I like to say, Hollywoodized. Nobody says "hoo-ah" every 30 seconds, right? But those helicopters, you see those men sliding down the ropes, those are actual Task Force 160s, those are Rangers and Delta guys. For insurance reasons, they wouldn't let actors on there, or I should say classified reasons too, and vice versa. So they sent over a company, this was filmed in Morocco, and it was based on the book. The military, the Army gave its full support. I would tell you that a bunch of actors did go to the Ranger Regiment and kind of lived the life of a Ranger for a couple of weeks. They did that with Delta. So I did hear some funny stories where we had some guys, on the set, and they were screaming out "cut" when the director Jerry Bruckheimer was getting pissed at them because they were doing stuff. They had their finger on the trigger, right? Cut. What did, that's not how we would do that. So he's like, guys, we're trying to make a movie here. I can't do everything exactly the same. That being said, yeah, the time frame, they had to make it for a movie. We didn't have our names across our helmets. Some of the characters were real. Some of the characters were a conglomeration of some of the real people. As far as Captain Steele, we used to call him Coach. Captain Steele is a massive dude. He played at University of Georgia. He was on the line blocking for Herschel Walker. And the fact that this beast of a man could run and do what he does was pretty impressive. That being said, he was a good old boy. I enjoyed him. I got along with him fine. I would tell you, again, I mentioned it earlier in the presentation, being a Ranger and going to work with Delta members, that's your ultimate goal. I was enamored. I felt honored to be used. It'd be like playing for Tom Brady. It'd be like Tom Brady throwing me a pass. That's how I felt to them. However, at the officer level, at that executive level, he had young privates, Captain Steele. He was trying to keep those kids in line. They're young kids in a way. They were elite kids, but they were young kids. You have Delta members who are all bearded up, have their hands in their pockets. They're a lot of them look like surfers, right? And so you see that as a young Ranger, young special operator, and that's what you want to be, and you start doing it, and you're losing your military discipline. So from his standpoint, I would tell you he was trying to do that. That being said, he's a blockhead. He's our blockhead, but he's a blockhead, right? He's a good guy, yeah.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
I can just shout it out.
Okay.
Yeah. Gentlemen, thank you.
Gentlemen, this has been fantastic. Fellow Somali vet, as I said earlier, so this has been the best discussion I've heard in probably 25 years, really. Thank you so much for sharing. Your memories are incredible. My question is, I saw my son walking in, it's almost like, not in the Korean War way, but the Forgotten War, but how it's not talked about as much, Somalia, in regards to like Iraq and Afghanistan. Just curious from your perspective, if you get that respect that you deserve and that it's still in the minds of Americans and it's talked about in the way that we honor our Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans. I'm kind of curious because we're coming up on 25 years and it's obviously very near and dear to your heart. So I'm just wondering your experience since then in regards to the Vietnam veterans help you serve and then passing it on to the Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans, if it's been a good experience since October 3rd, 1993.
I'll tell you from my standpoint, it's fine. It's great. They made a silly movie of it. You know what I mean? In a book, you would have never known about that. So that's great. I would tell you though, internally within special operations, younger Rangers do look up to that. One of my best friends who became a first sergeant major of the regiment, he was with what's called Ranger Training Battalion. New kids come straight out of airborne, they try out for the Rangers. This was right after, this is 95, all of them had a Black Hawk Down book, right? They're all coming in, and he would just get smoked beyond belief for having your Black Hawk Down book. So that being said, internally within special operations, the guys that stayed in became colonels. D. Tommaso, I think it's okay to say, was a commander of the Delta Squadron. There's a lot of guys that ended up in Delta. A lot of guys became sergeant majors. 10th of Korea, a lot of guys came first sergeants. So that group of men within that community who stayed in really are at, and most of them are starting to retire right now or have retired, but have gotten to that field grade level officer or command sergeant major of the regiment, something like that. So, back to your original question, yeah, whatever. As long as I have respect from, you know, my peers, that's all I care about.
Yeah, very much the same with amongst the aviators. I don't know that I quite touched on it before. The fourth Vietnam veteran that didn't make it home was Ray Frank, was Mike Durant's co-pilot. Ray was 45 years old when he was shot down and killed. Last year, we had a reunion of my first assignment when I graduated from flight school, and I was assigned to the 3rd Infantry Division in Germany. And at that time, the Vietnam veteran pilots were still early 30s, mid 30s. They were on active duty. And to us, they were the village elders. They were the guys you went to for advice and counseling, and they mentored us, gave us rules to live by, as I said at the beginning. And I got to address everyone. I was the guy that put together the reunion, so I had the mic. And I said, you know, when I was a young pilot, when I was 20 years old, right out of flight school, and I asked you guys, what's it like in combat? What can I expect? Please tell me, give me something. And they'd all say the same thing. They'd go, don't worry. When you get into combat, you'll be so busy trying to save your ass, you won't have time to be scared. So fast forward 37 years, and I see them all, and I said, you sons of bitches lied to me. And they got a good laugh out of that, and said, yeah, that's what we tell the new guys to get them past the first day. Where I had been lucky was my first combat mission was in Grenada, then I flew in Just Cause in Panama, got shot at a lot more during that one, and then Mogadishu. And each one prepared me for the next one after that. The next October, after Somalia, we were getting ready, if you remember, we were going to invade and liberate Haiti. And now I was going to be the flight lead aircraft, and I thought, you know, if this trend keeps continuing, this might be the one where I get shot down or shot up or something, but it didn't happen. We never did launch. The guy surrendered and abdicated. But yeah, it means a lot when you get the, like I said, the admiration and respect of your peers, the people that you look up to. Occasionally when a Vietnam vet will come up to us, kind of pat you on the shoulder and say, you're one of us now. It's huge. It means everything. Like I said, keep the medals, keep the books, keep the citations. I mean, that's important, but that's what really matters to all of us. And I think all of you will agree also.
Any other further questions? If you guys can just bear with me for one more minute. We just have a couple of little tokens of appreciation for Pete and Jerry that we'd like to give on behalf of Long Meadow. Thank you so much. So, this concludes our evening. I just want to say thank you all again for coming. If we could give them one more round of applause, please.